Welcome to the second episode of Troublemakers for Justice. I'm your host, Enehi, and this is
Aniqa.
And we're here with Jensen and Aseel to talk about Quakerism and Protest.
Also, happy Arab American Heritage Month. And I think the goal is to try to connect Quakerism and Protest with the month. Thank you so much for joining. If you'd like to quickly introduce yourselves.
I am Jensen Pennock, she, her. I work at Earlham. I'm also an Earlham alum and an ESR alum. I work with the Quaker Fellows program here. I instruct that program, and I also work in the marketing department, which is a weird combination, but good.
Yeah, my name's Aseel, she, her pronouns, and I'm from Palestine. I'm a female student studying theology.
First of all, before we jump in, I'm just curious as to when you heard about being invited to the podcast, what you were expecting, what your own general thoughts about Quakerism and Protest are, and what your initial response to this is.
Okay. I think my very first thought was that it was recorded on a day that I couldn't make it. So I was like, okay, I'm gonna give other resources about somebody else who I think could do this. But I was really excited about the idea of this, the theme of this podcast, and I think I'm excited to talk about it, and also want to just say, like, I am speaking as an individual. I'm not a representative of Quakers, and not an expert in some of these things, but I'm excited to talk about it. It's an important conversation. I'm happy to share my thoughts and listen.
Thank you. Yeah, I was definitely very excited. I watched the first episode, and the questions there were very interesting, so I was excited. I'm not Quaker myself, but I went to a Quaker high school, so I've encountered Quakerism. I think Quakerism and protest go hand in hand, but at the same time there are a lot of differences. I think growing up in a Quaker high school, we were taught about conflict resolution, conversations, peace, and while sometimes that does relate to protests, they're all very different.
Yeah. What high school did you go to?
I went to high school in Palestine, school.
Okay. That's really cool.
The headquarters for that Quaker congregation is actually based in Richmond.
Oh,
I think
what?
it's the FUM.
Yes.
Yeah.
Over at Quaker Hill.
Yeah. This question might just be for you, Jensen, but so if you want to answer, please jump in. How do you think Quakers balance the need for social activism with their commitment to peace and violence?
Yeah. I was thinking about this a lot today as I was thinking about this podcast. I think it depends which Quakers you ask. So I'm going to answer as myself. And I consider myself to be kind of an agnostic Quaker. Like, I think the Quaker testimonies are, sorry, I'm kind of going off track, but I think of them as almost humanist values. And I have my own beliefs about the divine and what it could be, and I believe in, if there is the divine, I think the inner light is something that makes sense to me. Anyways, getting off track, but I think, I think there is a history of Quakers being, and currently there's this understanding of Quakers being pacifists, and this belief that there is that of the divine in every person. Everybody is worthy of dignity and respect. And so the way that I think about this is that there are ways to be engaged in kind of protests, and like, yes, certainly there are nonviolent ways to protest. Certainly there are things that people can do that are not maybe inherently violent, but I also think that in response to violence, whether violent oppression or personal violence, I don't know if I would call resistance to that violence. So I know that I'm saying a lot of things in circles, but what I'm trying to say is that I think there are a lot of Quakers who would condemn violence of any form. and have a very explicit understanding of what violence is, like any acts of physical violence, any acts of whatever. But I think it's my understanding that there are different ways to engage in social change movements and activism. Every type of way to engage is necessary. Like, there are people who are going to be okay with this and not okay with this. And you need all of it to make change, because you have to bring more people into movements. And I think sometimes violence in the face of oppression is not violence, which is a complicated thing to say. And I don't even know if that makes sense outside of my head, but hopefully.
Yeah. So, as you know, there was an email sent out by Earlham in response to the situation with their silence in the whole Palestine and Israel issue. And I'm going to read out the email, and then we're going to talk about it, if that's okay. So, this email was from the Board of Trustees, specifically Thomas Thornburg. And it says, "Dear Earlham community, Earlham and Quakers have a long-standing concern for the Middle East, from the Ramallah Friends School to former President Landrum Bolling's work to build peace and understanding amongst Israeli and Palestine leaders. Earlham has had alumni, students, and faculty from both Palestine and Israel. In light of recent email exchanges, social media posts, and messages to members of Earlham's Board of Trustees and Administration, the board affirms and supports statements made by President Anne Hartman on October 11th and in the November 8th email that Anne sent out to a group of alumni in response to their concerns. The board supports the efforts of Anne and the Earlham faculty, staff, administration in addressing the impact of the crisis on our students and the wider campus community. The safety of our students and faculty is our highest priority, and we are grateful that the violence and hate speech that other campuses are experiencing has not happened at Earlham. This is lived evidence of our principles and practices, which call on us to celebrate and respect the diverse perspectives that each member of the community brings to Earlham. We stand with Anne and her senior leadership team in affirming and supporting the rights of students and alumni to engage on this issue. Given the fact that the Earlham community comprises of thousands of people with individual perspectives on world events, we do not expect nor would we support Anne issuing a statement that implies or assumes there is consensus in the Earlham community around this crisis. The board is holding in the light Palestinians and Israelis at Earlham, in the Middle East, and around the world."
Thomas Thornburg, 84,
Yes.
chair.
So I guess as a start, we just want to know what your general thoughts are on this email, whether it was satisfactory, and whether you, like, how you feel on the school stance on this issue. Yeah.
Okay. I'm like backtracking and then going forward. I think that I saw the what's the word I'm looking for? Petition for alumni to sign. I am an alum. And so I was in, in some circles where I had access to the statement that was floating around before the petition was submitted, and I was reading through it, and I was like, yeah, this is how I feel. This is a stance that I think is correct and right. And obviously everything is going to, change over time and adjust to new information and whatever. But I do think that there is this, and I'll say this, like, I have a lot of, I have personal relationships with people in senior administration who I love and care about, and personal relationships less with people, maybe not even really people on the board. I've met people on the board, and I think there is the, maybe the Quaker in me, there is, this understanding that everybody is worthy of, everybody has dignity, everybody's worthy of respect. And also, I think there's sometimes a moral imperative to do something in the face of something that is clearly wrong. And so I signed the petition, And I told my supervisor that she would see my name on it because I am a faculty member, and I think that is, like it's a little tense sometimes when you're saying something or making a stance that is potentially in opposition to what the administration of your organization are saying. Yeah. But it's really important to me, and so I think this response is like, yes, I think it does address the complexity of views among Earlham alums and donors and community members in whatever way. Do I think it's right? No. So, yeah, I mean, I think I understand why it was said, and also it is not aligned with what I think is the right thing to do.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for sharing.
Mm-hmm.
I think my initial response was anger and frustration. A couple of weeks before that email, we were working behind the scenes on talking to Earlham, asking them to put out a statement because they put one out in the past and we've had a lot of meetings with them. And seeing that they summed all of that up in that tiny email they sent to everyone was definitely very frustrating. But as I read it again, I found it funny somehow. It was very ironic that they mentioned the principles, which I don't necessarily think they're sticking by. But again, I don't think it's about consensus among the Earlham community. We've seen consensus among the Earlham community, whether it's by people coming to walkouts and speaking at walkouts and asking Earlham to take a stance, or just by attending, events, or by Jewish students saying we support SJP. I don't think it's necessarily about consensus. I think it's about taking a stance and speaking out rather than satisfying everyone.
Mm-hmm. Do you have any thoughts when you read the email or as you were rereading it?
Mm-hmm. I think it's really just disappointing, and I understand the nuances between reading it as a faculty member and reading it as a student. Mm-hmm. Feeling a lot of anger, but in different ways, being able to express that anger. And for me, I was just mainly disappointed at the constant excuse of Quakerism in opposition to protest, especially protests for violent issues, because it seems very contradictory to me to hear an institution that is filled with so many people from places where these issues are affecting them directly have nothing to say about it and say that it's because of maintaining consensus or being nonviolent. And so I was just disappointed.
Yeah. I think this instance just made me think about how we function as a school, who gives a lot of donations to the school, and what do they stand for, and how Earlham as an institution decides on things based on that, because I get it, donations are a big part of running this place. But then also I know a lot of Quaker organizations who are so intentional on building and maintaining those relationships with people who also have the same values. And I think for me, being at a Quaker institution, it should be about inspiring to your own accountability. And that's just something that I haven't seen here a lot. So it was very disappointing and just misusing Quakerism as an excuse to defend what you did in a way. But yeah.
At a certain point it stops being, are you standing up for your principles and what you stand for? It becomes a reputation, how a reputation suffer, and what's the backlash we're going to see.
And so we have another question in relation to that, just seeing how students respond. How do you think the students at Earlham, especially those of Arab American heritage, navigate Ireland's stance on neutrality in relation to their own identity and advocacy efforts?
I think one of the reasons I transferred to Ireland was because I saw the support they gave Palestinian students. I watched my brother's graduation and they mentioned Palestine and they have a Palestinian flag in the background, and that's one of the main reasons I knew. And it was really disappointing seeing that when you're actually needing support and where you're actually seeking it, people just disappear. I think we've worked a lot. We reached a point of burnout, but I don't think that's going to be the point of stopping for us, even though they're going to send out a lot of emails and they're going to say we're going to take a neutral stance. I think we're going to try our best, at least send a message. We have a lot of people supporting us, if not on an administrative level, on a personal level. It's bittersweet.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think it's interesting you mentioned that was what got you to come to Ireland. I feel like it's really unfair for them to advertise expectations they actually cannot live up to. Something else I found out recently is that the Native American student, Talasha, that they constantly advertise, never graduated from Ireland. But they still claim her as their alumni. And so the conflicting viewpoint within like administration, marketing, we even ran into an issue with this where we were completely not okay with them taking pictures of our events that they constantly fought to make sure didn't happen. But when it happened, they'd be like, let's take a picture of that. Yeah. So yeah.
I think to me what's also crazy is that this email talked about how we're grateful that the violence and hate speech that other campuses are experiencing has not happened at Ireland. And I think that's just the bare minimum. Like, it's not even something to be mentioned. That's something that just should not absolutely be happening at all. Like, I think every time I revisit this email, it's just very hypocritical. But yeah. But I think regardless, I did see from at least my experience, there were some people who were very supportive, so not to say like no one was there.
Yeah, no, I agree.
Yeah.
Definitely. Even people who work at Ireland on a personal level, I can't be grateful enough for them. But when they're speaking as their role, that's where the support goes missing.
Mm-hmm. That's a great observation.
Yeah. The final question for this podcast we have is, do you think Ireland College can stay neutral and simultaneously support and advocate for marginalized communities during these times?
No. I mean, I don't think so. I don't think that you can be neutral in the face of oppression or in the face of explicit violence or whatever. Like, I think there have been, I'm going to go into a Quaker place. Like, I think Quakers have been neutral in the past. Like, Quakers are not perfect. Quakers have gotten a lot of things wrong. There have been many who have kind of maintained a neutral stance. And then I'm thinking of AFSC. Like, I read that article that you sent me. Now I'm forgetting the title of it.
Like how Quakers are not friends.
Yes. Yeah.
Like that. Yeah.
When did Quakers stop being friends?
Yes.
But it was talking about the history of American Friends Service Committee and how AFSC used to take like a fairly neutral stance, and then at one point, I forget which war they were responding to, but they were like, "Oh, we actually can't be neutral. That's against what we believe and value, and is impossible in the face of injustice, because you have to take action and to have to support people who are being actively oppressed or displaced or whatever, like violence is being enacted upon people by a certain group, I don't think you can be neutral. I think it's impossible. That's just
Yeah. Great.
I think other than the obvious reasons of why Earlham should take a stance, on a personal, individual level, I feel like taking a stance would mean Palestinian students, Arab students are heard and seen. Without that, without making us feel like we're here and we're part of the community and you appreciate us, we're not going to come to you for help. We're not going to come to you for support. And we're always going to be doubtful of your support. So I think, yeah, like extending deadlines and saying you support us and coming to our events, that's one way of supporting appreciated. But it can only go so far when you're not taking a stance and when you're not, seeing the real issue and talking about it.
So no?
no. Can I say one more thing?
Yes, of course.
I'm just thinking about the kind of complexity, and this is not a fully formed thought, so bear with me as I think about this. But I mean, I think Earlham is, yes, it's a Quaker institution, but like it's an institution, it's a business. And so I think it gets, like, do I think business can be neutral? That's a more complicated question. I'm not a business expert, but I think what calls people to act is often, I don't know, like to act in terms of their morality or their whatever it is. Like, I think often business is not the thing driving really ethical decisions. And so I think that we see that pretty often, where there's kind of this tension between Earlham's identity as a Quaker institution and Earlham as a business. And I see that difficulty, and I think we all see it and experience it in some ways. But I think leaning into the Quaker identity, if that's what we're doing, necessitates not being neutral. And so, like, where's the, I don't know. It's not a full thought. No.
Yeah. That's all we have. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Don't let them fool you. That's not Quakerism.
I think it wasn't me who said that. It was my friend Laura. It was but yeah,
that's right.
But I did say something after her. But yeah, she's great. 10 out of 10 recommend. Shout out to Laura. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Thank you guys so much for coming on our podcast. We absolutely love this, and we hope that this conversation can continue. Yeah.